That was a terrible time for my watch to go off. Cool, and we are live.
Hello, welcome to the Wellbeing Show with me, Noel McDermott, your host. And this week, joined by two amazing guests, Kenneth Braswell, who's over in Atlanta, Georgia, and Dan Lassalle, who's with us here in the UK. Welcome back, Dan. It's lovely to have you back. We've got a special edition this evening because, as you may or may not know, it's Father's Day this coming Sunday, and both these guys are amazing advocates in the field of sort of father and men in general. And so we're very lucky to have them both on this evening to come and talk about issues around being a man and being a father in these days and times, which has thrown up some relatively unique challenges. It'd be lovely to get you involved in the conversation, folks. There's a number of platforms that we're streaming on simultaneously. Facebook Live we're on. We're also on YouTube. And this evening we're streaming on Periscope, which is a Twitter platform. And so we'd love to get your feedback and comments on those platforms. I will try throughout the evening to go and check them out. So you might see my eyes go off somewhere at various points, but I'll let you know what I'm doing, and I'll see if I can pick up the comments from people joining in there, and then I can feed them into these two amazing men who can sort of field them with me. Also, you can call. Because this is live, and it'd be great to get you on air with us. And the number to call is 07 506 319 745. That's 07 506 319 745. If you're calling from outside of the UK, add a plus and a 44 and drop the first 0. So it's +44 7506 319 745. It'd be lovely to hear from you. If you're worried about carrier charges calling from abroad, I'll take your call on WhatsApp. Don't you worry. So let me know what your number is, and we'll get you on air with these guys and get your contributions to the show. Enough from me. I'm going to introduce you to our two guests and give them a bit of time to tell us about themselves. As we're going to lose Kenneth first, because Ken can only stay with us for about the first hour of the show, I might start off with you, if that's all right, Ken. And ask you to, I think you're on mute at the moment, so unmute yourself. Tell us who you are, Ken. Introduce yourself. Let us all know who you are.
So I am a husband, a father, a grandfather, an uncle, a business person, man of God, all kinds of things I am. I am the CEO of Fathers Incorporated. To be more specific, we began Fathers Incorporated in 2004 with an eye towards providing direct service to fathers that were dealing with issues around custody, child support, and visitation. Quickly realized doing that work that those were just symptoms of broader issues, that we were working with fathers that were having difficulty in areas of employment and education and parenting skills and all of those kinds of things, and shifted our focus into doing capacity building and professional development work for not-for-profit agencies providing services, particularly for families, but not necessarily fathers. And so 16 years later, we continue to do that work across a broad spectrum of areas, including our local work in Atlanta, our national work in America, and our international work around the world, and really trying to advance and elevate the importance of responsible fatherhood.
Great. We've just lost the sound on you for some reason, Ken.
Oh, no.
So I'm hoping it comes back.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, got you back.
Yeah, no, I stopped talking.
Oh, right. That's what happened. Okay. So I've got a time delay. I was looking at Facebook Live. I forget there's a time delay on Facebook Live. That's what happened. So I'll get back to looking at the live screen. Dan, jump in and tell us who you are after that, if you can follow that.
It's very hard to follow, Kenny, isn't it?
It is, isn't it?
I'm a dad, I'm an uncle, I'm a partner, and I'm the founder of an organisation called Dadless Soul here in the UK. We're what I like to call a revolutionary grassroots movement that uses arts, technology and music to tackle social isolation in dads. The bottom line is middle-aged men don't talk about their issues or their problems. It's incredibly symptomatic as us as men, but it has some dire consequences. That's why there's 96 men a week in the UK under 45 being lost to suicide because men don't talk. So what we've done is we put together play dates for dads and kids. So every week in different areas, we get the dads and kids together. So rather than going to a mother and baby group and feeling, like an outsider or having your parenting skills judged, the dads and kids come together and we do everything from stand-up comedy workshops, rap workshops, we build robots, we have tea parties, and it gives a chance for the kids to play, make some Saturday friends, and the dads to also make them friends. It's basically because as you get older, you tend to lose your friendship groups, or they become incredibly small. They're the people that you tend to meet the partners of the people that your wife or partners met at the school gates, and that's who you socialise with. But there's a massive issue there if you don't have any sort of deeper relationships with them. So where do you go? So with Dadless Soul, we bring the dads and kids together, we play, we learn, we make friends, and out of that builds much stronger relationships. So the dads can actually put a hand up and go, you know what, this week, well, I'm really struggling here, fellas. You've got this lovely network of other dads that are coming in to help without judgment. So yeah, we're a revolutionary force. That's what we do.
It's great. I mean, one of the things that struck me, because I remember when I first started in father's work, which was over 25 years ago, it didn't exist. That was the thing, that there was nothing. And you would go to these groups that were called parent and toddler groups, but they weren't. They were mums groups, and that's the fact. And that not much has changed there. But the other thing was that it was just impossible to. I mean, it was my job to outreach to fathers, and it was almost impossible to get fathers in through the door of traditional services because of for a whole bunch of reasons, and whatever those reasons are. What I'm interested in is that I'm now talking to two grassroots fathers who saw the problem and decided to do something about it, and that seems to me a very different approach to the idea of a service, an established service, trying to do some work for fathers, which doesn't seem to work. I guess I'm interested in what motivated you both to want to move into this area. Before we get to there, though, I think it's, what I'd like to do is, because we're going through unique times, really quite extraordinary, unprecedented times, for a number of reasons. One is the pandemic and the ongoing issues around that, but also because of Black Lives Matter and what that is sort of now challenging us to take responsibility for, and quite rightly so. That's current in the UK as much as it is in the US, and it's a very powerful movement here as well. I wondered that maybe I could just ask you both just to think about how are you managing at this time? And then I want to come on to how you got into the work. And I also want to come on to this very special project, this international project that you're putting together for Father's Day, which I think is unprecedented, actually, in my experience. It's absolutely unprecedented. This level of cooperation between guys that doesn't end up in a brawl. I mean, seriously, that is, really quite extraordinary. And so I really want to get into that. But I'd like to get current, if you don't mind. And if you just tell me, maybe from a very personal perspective, how you're experiencing as a guy and as a father, and the many roles that you have, the current situation that we're in and how you're coping. Ken, do you mind if I come back to you again and sort of just get your take?
I think that, for me, it is the realization that we're actually in two crises right now, or new crisis, right? And so the two new crises would be COVID-19 and the health pandemic. And the second crisis would be just the nature of the societal focus now on, you know, Black Lives Matter and Black civil rights and those kinds of things. And then for me, there's this existing crisis that people don't pay attention to because we move about our own merry lives and don't pay much attention to it, and that is poverty, right? And so poverty, that crisis has always existed, which makes these other two things exacerbate in terms of the space, and particularly for low-income parents and the parents that we serve. It is kind of like, you know, now that the US and the rest of the world has a headache, we've always had a migraine. And so we've been always functioning in this space. And now I think someone asked me the other day, what's the difference between Ahmaud Arbery and George Floyd and Breonna Taylor to Trayvon Martin, Eric Gardner, Walter Scott, to Yusef Hawkins from the late 70s to Emmett Till to the late 50s, right? And so, and the answer is nothing has changed, right? And so there always has been a reaction, sometimes bigger, sometimes smaller, but there's always been a level of work towards trying to figure out how do you bring a level of compassion to your community that allows everybody to live and function on an equal playing field, right? And so for me as an agency, much of my work hasn't changed. It has changed very little in the sense that people are paying more attention to me now than they did before because I'm fashionable, right? I'm a Black man working with Black children and Black families, and more specifically, Black dads. And so I'm fashionable right now. And I know that that trend will fade, but I'm in position to at least ensure that people who see me now understand the relevance of the work that we've always tried to do and that we're going to continue to do. COVID-19 has shifted us in a way to which we're communicating right now. I think that part of what's happening with Dad La Soul and Fathers Incorporated and Daddy Saturdays is not that we have not had the desire to work together. We've just kind of always thought person to person. We've always thought like, in order for me to work with Dan, I got to be in the UK. In order for you guys to work with me, you got to be in Atlanta.
Absolutely.
In order for me to work with Justin, I got to be in South Carolina. And this technology piece has broken all of that up, right? And I think we figured it out the quickest. The three of us is like, wait a minute, we could actually bring folks from the UK, folks from the US, from different cultural backgrounds, and bring them under the same umbrella that all of us can get with in subject matter, and that is fatherhood. And so in a very strange way, both the civil unrest and COVID has created an environment of tension. In a very beautiful way, it's kind of exposed us to our broader commonalities more than it has our differences.
That's very much my feeling, actually, Ken. Do you mind if I call you Ken rather than Kenneth?
And Kenny, doesn't matter. You're good.
Okay. Okay, cool. So it's very much my experience of this current phase of history that we're in, that there seems to me some very strong bonding that's happening around common humanity, and people finding connection. I mean, there's obviously always going to be individuals and organizations and groups that exploit division. I mean, I think that's a reality. We know that from history, but what I think of the social contract, particularly with ordinary people and poor people, that has been very, very strong during this period of time. And we've seen governments around the world bringing that social contract to the fore in terms of, you know, having economic rescue packages that are aimed at supporting those people that are traditionally ignored, particularly in the sort of the way mainstream Western economies have gone over the last 15 years, that the division between the hyper wealthy and the extremely poor has grown and grown and grown. But it does seem to me that the social contract has been strong in this one, and that this idea, and also I'm struck, you know, one of the things that strikes me the most is the people who've been most important during the pandemic are the people we most ignore. So the folks that have been emptying my bins, the people that have been at my local shops serving me, making sure that I've got food and goods and can keep going, are the people that I just don't notice every day, but I bloody well notice them now, I'm telling you. And they have become really, really important. And my relationship to those people, those invisible people, which is, I think, partly what you're talking about, Ken. Poverty is invisible. We've somehow sidelined it as a real issue. That very strong. So I'm getting on a soapbox there. I want to come to Dan, but I was very struck by what you're saying, Ken. Dan, what's been your experience during this period of time, sort of as a guy, but also as an activist and organizer?
First of all, it was bloody terrifying. We're a non-profit organisation. Suddenly, all the funding dried up like that. Our ability to put on events disappeared. The insurance companies didn't want to pay out, so we had nothing. So we had I think a 2-week period where myself and our other sort of directors, who were all volunteers, and the majority of those are self-employed, we just went into a tailspin going, what the bloody hell are we going to do? We're losing our own businesses. We're going to lose this thing that we worked so hard over the last 4 years at the exact time where more people are going to need what we do. It went crazy, but then we did what dads do best. We took a step back and we built something cool. It was like, okay, we can't do the play dates, but we can put them onto Zoom. So we thought, why not? And actually, out of that, something really lovely happened. We're based in the South Coast, so we do our groups pretty, regionally to us. But through these, when we took them online, we had dads from Spain and France taking part. So we thought, hold on, you've got families that are, the cousins couldn't play together, taking part, and it didn't matter where the background or the social demographics or any of that came up. We came together and played, and we've just sort of grown. And then it was quite by chance. I was in a sort of virtual networking event 6-8 weeks ago, just because it was a Monday morning. I thought, I've got to start talking to people rather than living and working in my flat. I only had my son sort of 3 days a week, so the rest of the time I was kind of on my own and going slightly mad, if I'm honest. In this networking thing, I got talking to this lovely lady from Berlin, and she goes, "Oh, well, I know somebody else that's sort of into a similar sort of dad's revolution thing in the States. You should meet him." And she put me in touch with Justin from Daddy Saturday over in Carolina. We had a couple of misses, got onto Zoom, going, boom, where he was coming from, I was coming from. These are two complete strangers from very different backgrounds, with a similar overarching view. And then he's going, right, how can we work together? And he's saying, well, actually, you should meet Kenny. This is a fellow I met at the Super Bowl from, Fathers Inc. And you'd have a lot in common. I said, well, I checked him out online. Whoa, okay. So then we all started coming together, and the space of I think it was the first Zoom call. You've got these 3 vastly different people from very different backgrounds with this common thread. And it's like, out of something that is intensely horrific, i.e., the COVID and lockdown, we've been forced to have overcome these challenges in the way that we could. So it's almost, I would love to say we had plans to go international, which we did, but lockdown actually forced that almost 2 years before it was due to happen. And it's just like, you've got, kids in Atlanta, black kids, and then I've got white kids over here in leafy Sussex and stuff like that. If we can bring them all together in a play date with kids from Europe or Spain, they're going to start making friends. They're going to start having conversations about what lockdown looks like for them. They're going to be able to have conversations, especially at the moment going on with kids that, again, from very different backgrounds, and go, I don't understand what it's like to be you. Can you tell me? And out of all of that, something beautiful is going to happen. we've got, I think this is a really a force for good, and I'm immensely proud to be working with great people like Kelly and Justin.
Absolutely, it's extraordinary. It is unprecedented in my experience, and I've been in the field far longer than I want to admit. So I mean, and there is something happening in our times, as Ken and you said as well, Dan, that there is something happening that is forcing us to make connections. Maybe it's being faced with something quite horrific, but whatever it is, it's great, and it is coalescing into, and I want to big this up into an event on Sunday, isn't it? So why don't you talk us through this event on Sunday and how people can access it and how they can become part of it, because I'd like to make sure that we may get that out to as big an audience as possible, really.
Yeah, well, I'll pick up if you don't mind. Basically, is what we've done, we've taken our virtual play dates that we've been running for the last couple of months. We've changed the time, so it's 4 o'clock in the UK, which means it fits for the, our pals over in the US, that they can come and join in. So the idea is that we've got dads from different parts of the US, Kenya, France, Spain, Germany, all over the UK, coming together. You go onto the website that we've set up called the Dadifesto 2020. That is our manifesto. We are standing for something.
That's great.
It's completely free. It's completely free. We've got some very.
It's a classic dad joke as well. I mean, I love it. It's exactly right, isn't it? Dadifesto. Whoa, Dad, that's stupid.
Yeah. But we stand for something. A manifesto is we politically we stand for something. So rather than just having a nice friendly play date, this is a play date with a social conscience. We can have those messages. So go on to Dadifesto 2020. We have got some spaces available. We've got I hate to say a VIP list, but the idea is to get dad influencers from other groups. So we've got the Father Network Scotland, for example, taking part. We've got Fathers Reaching Out, which are a Welsh version. And the idea is that we can get all of these different dad groups together, having a play. Then we can go, right, Kenny, after the play, Kenny, tell us how you got to the White House and you started influencing policy, because we need to do that in the UK. Or Dan, how do you do that? And I think the hopes outside of this is that it opens the door to a lot more collaboration, because we've got all these great organisations spread around the world.
One of the things that's really striking me in the conversation with both of you is that you're taking a proactive, positive approach, and I presume, I haven't read your Dadifesto, I will, but I presume it will be very positive in outlook, and sort of encouraging connections. And there have been historically issues, and I want to maybe talk a bit about that and how you both got into the field. But there's been historically some issues around, Fathers for Justice and things like that, which is a UK-based organisation, Kenneth, which has, created friction around certain issues, and has been, is quite militant in its approach. I don't want to take a political line, but it had a particular approach that wasn't particularly inclusive, let's say. Whereas what I'm getting from both of you is a very different feel and vibe. That it's not this idea of finding something to attack. With Fathers for Justice, I think it was the legal system around apportioning care. But it's much more about finding the commonalities and connections between guys because they are fathers and the experience of fathering. How did it start with you, Kenneth? How did you get into this field? Why on earth would you want to become a father's worker? It's like,
I just want to address what you just said about, and we have them here in the US as well, fathers groups. And when I first got into this work, they were loud in the space, right? They were really loud. And a lot of people, when I first began Fathers Incorporated, misunderstood us for being a fathers' rights organization. It took 4 or 5 years before I could get people to understand that that's not what we did. Now, the irony in that is that I used to often get asked to come speak to at their conferences and things of that sort. And I was always struck by how, as loud as they were in the space, like when I would start talking, they would get really quiet. And it was this point that you just made, which is, so as Dan and I and Justin, and we both begin, or we all do this work around responsible fatherhood and the beauty of fatherhood, right? The singularity of fatherhood. It was me understanding not to disconnect them from that, right? To understand where their pain was coming from, their anxiety was coming from, what was driving them to act that way so vigilantly, right? And so, and my conversation with them was always, I get it. We all were mad. We all are mad at the system. We're all mad at the mothers of our children who won't give us access. We're mad at the child support system for taking all of our money out of our checks. We're mad at the government for not paying attention to fathers, and we're not considered in policies and programs and funding. We're mad about all of that, but we're never going to get anywhere like this, right? And so while I'm not telling you what to do, what I'm saying to you is that I can't be you. I have to do the work in a different way and respect why you're doing and understanding what you're doing. And I think that that was at the core of me getting into Fathers Incorporated. However, the more intimate answer to your question is I got into the field of responsible fatherhood the same way most people walk into social service, right? Most people who are homeless do work for homeless people. Most people who deal with substance abuse get into working with people with substance abuse. Most people who have been victims of DV get into working with people with DV. My thing at the time was struggling in family court with the mother of my youngest daughter and trying to get access to my daughter. That was, and so I walked into that already understanding community development and community work and family development and all those other things. But I walked in it from a personal perspective. And that perspective was, I didn't want another person to have to walk through the system that I was walking through. And I wanted to change my focus in terms of what I was doing at the time, which was around workforce development, to really begin to get to how do I stabilize these guys so that they don't get to this point. They don't get to sitting in this room and having someone who has absolutely no idea who they are telling them and mandating how to raise and support their children. Right? And giving them the support system that allows them to walk along that line, even when the system's not working for them, right? Because what I don't want them to do is go and get mad and do other things that's going to make situations worse, but give them an accountability system and a support system that allows them to walk through it, understanding that they're not alone. And so that's how I got into the work. And so I just transitioned my career from doing one thing to really focusing on this extremely focused way of looking at fathers. And then over the evolution of my career coming to this day, everything we do is still through the lens of fatherhood. I don't, we have a saying, we have a training that is our primary training called What About Dad? And when I talk to organizations, I say that one thing about Kenneth Braswell and Fathers Incorporated, no matter what room we walk into, you only have one answer for me, and that is what about dad? I don't care what you're talking about. I don't care if you're talking about jumping rope. I don't care if you're talking about racing cars, whether you're talking about homelessness. I don't care what you're talking about. When I walk into the room, all I want to know is how do dads fit in this conversation, and are they considered as part of the solution and not always a part of the problem? Yeah. And so it was a great transition for me in terms of Fathers Incorporated to do that.
Yeah, I mean, I guess, and it is a challenging area. And I, brought up the idea of Fathers for Justice because people are worried about fathers' organizations because of that type of approach. I mean, on a very personal level, just talking about myself as a stepfather, my experience of being a stepfather is that I'm devoid of rights. And being devoid of rights has made me think about my relationship to now my ex-partner and my ongoing stepson in a very different way, because I have no rights. And therefore, well, what do I do with that? and how do I engage with that as a guy and as a father, and then find a space within that forms a relationship and the type of relationship that I want. And it has meant I've had to negotiate. Not that I wasn't able to do that before, but certainly taking the rights out of it and then just thinking about, well, what is there and what can I put into it has sort of revolutionized my thinking in many ways. And that was partly why I wanted to bring it on. Dan, what about you? How did you sort of become this international megastar that you are now?
I wouldn't go that, but I just want to touch. We've had, this is another bit of commonality of it. We have a lot of comparisons to fathers to justice as well. You know, as soon as it's that word dad, and it's not about dad rights. So, well, we don't dress up in superhero costumes, and without being flippant, we don't hate women. You know, quite a lot of our supporters are mums because they can see the benefit of the stuff that we're doing, not just the cliche they get a few hours off on a Saturday because the dad's good. They can see the improved relationships that the dads are having with the kids. So there's less tension at home. They get a bit more support. They can, you know, be able to support their partners as well. So we've still got a lot of work to educate people around. But if I ever, we get, you know, occasionally the online trolls and things like that, I just set one of our mums on them. You know, I'd step away from it and I'd get our mum the soldiers to.
Yeah, absolutely. Very sensible.
Keep at it. And that's because they're very passionate. They were probably even more passionate than quite a lot of our dads because they've seen the effect on it. From a personal perspective, I didn't set out for any of this to happen. As a child, when I was about 7 or 8, my dad was awarded custody of me and my 3 sisters, which was in the early 80s, which didn't happen. You know, it really didn't happen. My dad ran his own business and there was no support for him. There was, you know, if you think single parents organisations were things like gingerbread, which is brilliant, but at that time, that was for women that wore dungarees and had C&D badges on there. My dad, you know, went to Oxford and he was an architect. We wouldn't have ever gone to any of that. So I saw sort of firsthand the struggles that he went through, even though he never discussed them. You know, he just put it on his shoulders and got on with it, but it had a really detrimental effect in his health. And it showed itself years later. And then sort of fast forward 30 odd years, I've got a career as a senior analyst. On paper, I've got everything. I've got the nice house, the nice little family house. I live in the suburbs, but I was commuting all the time and I was really struggling as a dad. I didn't have, you know, I'd read all the books, read all the blogs, but I still had massive dad guilt that I wasn't performing in the way that I should do. And then when I'd work late, I'd rush home and get caught on the train or the commute and promise to put my son to bed, but then I'd have my BlackBerry beside me answering client emails because I've been sort of torn between these two worlds. And then around that time, my dad actually passed away and it made me really ill. Well, I was really ill kind of before that because I didn't handle the grief very well at all. I did typical man. I just shut up and got back to work. And it came to the point where I got chickenpox again for the second time, courtesy of my son. And I realised there was a part of that period that I played with him more in that period than I had done in months. And he was really happy to see me there. And I thought, I can't go back to this world where I'm out the door at 7 and not coming back till 7 or 8. And even at a weekend, I'd wander around the parks and just see loads of dads on their own or going to soft play and they're on their mobile phones. And it can be really kind of embarrassing, a middle-aged man, to put your hand up and I'd actually like some friends. You know, we can't do it. I don't want just, I've had, you know, blokes I worked with and people I knew, but majority of my old friends I only ever saw on Facebook. I didn't have anybody face to face that I could go and have a cuppa with and have a play date. So it sort of snowballed. I started blogging. The blog turned into a magazine for dads. That went into us launching the world's first agency of dad, which was a specialist PR agency that worked with brands to challenge those stereotypes. because I was sick of PR agencies sending us briefs for advertising campaigns that were really cheesy. You know, that dads can't dance and we're scared of the washing machine and we don't have to change a nappy. I think you're spending a fortune perpetuating these myths. It's bollocks, pardon my language, but it really is, and it needs to change. Then I went on and I set up an organisation called Top Rocking Beats, which was putting on afternoon raves, and we'd get young families and old folks and adults with learning difficulties coming together and partying. But through that, I was still struggling. I'd still have that common problem that on a Saturday or at the playground when I was picking my son up, there were a few dads around there, and they were nice fellas, but I still was really lonely. So I just thought there must be hundreds, or there must be people like me that like the same sort of things like me, that have the same problems and need to find them. So I took the sound system that we had for the raves and some soft play equipment, and actually talked to a friend of mine into giving his office space one Saturday, a very funky advertising agency. We took it over, so we had crafting in the boardroom, we were doing beatbox battles, and I think it was 13 or 14 dads, and about 20 kids came together for a couple of hours of undisputed chaos. But what was really lovely, nobody was on their phones. You know, normally you say to a fellow, come over and we're going to come into a room and you're not going to know anybody. And they go, socially awkward. But it wasn't. The dads were just chatting, the kids were playing, nobody was judging. And it was like, yeah, I'm here. I've got the Beastie Boys playing full blast. My son's having wrestling matches with some kids he's just met. Somebody else, this big strapping lad's having a tea party and being dressed up as a fairy. And nobody's batting an eyelid. This needs to happen. So from there, it sort of grew and grew and grew. So now we've got 4 or 5 regional clubs, and our plan is to go national stroke international. Couple of reasons. One, because there is a generation of dads that have been overlooked. You know, as we become more involved in parenting, we need role models, we need support, because otherwise you should be a hands-on. Yeah, I don't know how to do that. My dad wasn't, or I didn't really have a relationship with my dad, so I don't know what to do. I want to do better, but can you help me? So, okay, let's come here and, you know, listen to music and do stand-up comedy and stuff. And through that, you'll actually be safe enough to open up the conversations to go, you know, I don't know how to wipe my daughter's front bottom or something like that.
And that was what the research always said, that once you got guys through the threshold, it was fantastic. Things opened up, it flowered, it became amazing. But it was about getting guys through the threshold, through the door in the first place. I guess that comes back to an earlier point about the fact that you're not professionals coming in with a solution. You are fathers who've experienced, and guys have experienced something, and you wanted to do something about it because the experience wasn't great. Yeah. What's working for you, Kenneth, over there? I mean, Dan's been amazing at explaining what's working here. What's working for you?
Yeah, the cool thing about what I heard Dan say and what I was listening to him say is that you walk in to this space unknowingly, right? Because you're dealing with yourself. Like like when I was going through, I wasn't thinking about other dads, and I wasn't thinking about who else was going through my same problems. Those were my problems, right? But from a not-for-profit perspective, I began to start thinking the same thing he was thinking, which is, am I by myself? Like, am I the only one? Like, is anybody else going through what I'm going through? Is there anybody I can talk to? Is there anybody that I can relate to? Because at those times, as men, we know we do a great job at isolating ourselves, right? But during those times, we isolate even as much as we want help, we isolate ourselves from help. So we want people to help us, but then we don't want to be around anybody who can help us, which is like a man thing. That's just a crazy thing, right? And so it's kind of like, you know, you're hungry and you want to eat, but you don't want to go to a restaurant. You go to the hardware store. That's just how we function. And, you know, as a result of that and where I am today, you know, what happened for me is during that early time, those probably first 4 or 5 years, even though I knew what I wanted to do, I'm still learning myself. I'm still learning about me. I'm still learning about who I am as a father. I'm still, you know, I had to go through a period of exploring my own absent relationship with my father, right? I had to explore what that was doing to me and how that was framing my narrative. I had to grapple with the fact that I was young and dumb and was out of touch with my oldest daughter for some time, and had to deal with that guilt and deal with that shame, and then having another daughter and then having to figure out who are you now, and then meeting my wife and she had a daughter, and then having who are you now, and then I found out about a daughter later in life that I never knew about. And she showed up. It's like, whoa, who are you now? And this is all in the mix of me being Kenneth Braswell, CEO of Fathers Incorporated. This all didn't happen prior to that. This all happened during that. And so I'm trying to be this person that's helping other fathers not have to put themselves in a position where they don't understand their worth. But at the same time, I'm questioning my own worth.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm questioning whether or not I'm the dude that should be standing in front of people telling them how to be a dad. Like, what gives you the authority and the credentials to stand in front of dads and tell them what to do? And I think where I've landed with that is what gives me the credentials is just my authenticity, right? And my transparency, which is I don't have all the answers. And what I can tell you is how I've navigated it, how I've seen other people navigate it, how I've seen it work best for some, how I've seen it not work best for others, how I understood now where I didn't understand before, the importance of patience and compassion, right? And those kinds of things that give men the ability to craft their own pathway, right? And all of that has happened over the evolution of this career. I didn't walk into your point. There's no education out there or degree that you can go out there to do what we do. There isn't, right? And
absolutely isn't. That's right.
Even social work, right? Even
absolutely, it's not going to help.
Work, right? If you have a degree in social work, MSW or a doctorate in MSW or in social work, you are still not qualified to work with fathers. You're still, because the whole system of social work is really based on how you function and how you build the capacity of moms and children, right? And so it takes homegrown people like us with the discernment.
And more than that, I would say, I agree with that, but I think more than that, I think there's an inbuilt assumption in the social care services that you're also there to reduce the impact of toxic masculinity. So not only you, but you're, and so that's where we're viewed. And I understand that, and there's a truth to it. There is an absolute truth to it. And so I don't sort of deny that reality. I think it's real. But I guess what I'm hearing you saying is there's something else. There's another way that we can look at this, and this field is emerging, and you are the guys who are ploughing that furrow. And I was thinking, it was making me think about another thing is that because I have a postgraduate qualification. I'm a psychotherapist, clever guy. I help people who are broke, but in my relationship with my boy is the thing that unmans me, and that's where I'm most vulnerable. Always most vulnerable, my relationship with Matteo as a father, and that I still think I'm just making this up. I have no idea what I'm doing, and learning to tolerate that level of uncertainty is really, really important. And coming back to the point you said, Dan, and both of you have said, that I don't think it's possible to tolerate that level of uncertainty on your own for any length of time.
I think
just too much.
Yeah, I think if you do, it'll bury deep in you and it'll come out in the wrong way. You'll start drinking too much, or you'll end up in domestic violence, or you will seek solace somewhere else. But again, it's another, I think, just listen to Kenny going, I, as the founder of this organisation, sometimes, again, I feel like a massive fraud. What's because I'm hardly Mr. Perfect dad. But what had a it's a remarkable.
Thank God.
No, God, no, Jesus. I really wish I was. But actually, unfortunately, last year my marriage didn't work out. So I'm coming to grips with co-parenting and all of those battles. But what happened is that I've got this tribe, this community of dads that actually I've reached out to. And I don't understand what's going on, or I feel rubbish about this, or I've only got him for a few hours. And I feel guilty, and I want to do this, and this, but he's not ready to do this. How do I do? And out of that, there has been this utter beautiful outpouring of support, and dads opening up, some of them for the first time, about the stuff that they've gone through. And these are strangers. These are fellas that I've gone to school with that didn't know anything about it, and they've just opened up and out. It's almost like this, pardon the expression, but they've just been sick out of this almost me putting a card up, going up, I'm really struggling, has given them a pass to go, and what's coming, going, dude, I know exactly what you're going through. You need to speak to Jim. Or, we do tend to fix things, but also what I've learned is to listen. I can't always fix things, but I can have a cup of tea or have a beer and just listen. And some of the conversations that I've been privileged, absolutely privileged for people to share with me, have been remarkable, because normally you'd see these fellas in the town, how are you doing, father? Oh, I'm all right, yeah. You wouldn't notice, but almost a dadless soul pass or whatever, bang, open, out comes that, they unbutton the shirt, and the real them comes out, and they're allowed to be vulnerable, and that's kind of fantastic. I'm very, very proud of the stuff that we've been able to do because of that.
Yeah, Dan, I don't know if you're like me, like I can start having a conversation with a random guy, and we can begin having a conversation, and I can tell within 3 minutes whether or not this is going to be a 15 minutes conversation or a 2-hour conversation based on where it's going. Yeah. But the great thing about us and walking to this is we know that we open ourselves up for that. Like when people get to know you, they know that you're a safe space to have very intimate and vulnerable conversation. And so that's why patience is so important, because I gotta be able, if I hear a guy begin to start saying something that I know he doesn't typically talk to people about, and I know he's been harnessing within his heart, I gotta sit down and listen to him, because I know how desperately I needed someone to listen to me.
Yeah, it's absolutely, it's giving them a pass, because they could have this stuff and these stories, and they'll be on the tip of their tongue, but they can't tell it to anybody, because they'll be judged, or somebody would, just man up, pull yourself together, lad, because you've still got this. But yeah, we've had some truly remarkable conversations, and people have learned from it, and what they've taken is the weight off of their shoulders, but they've gone on and offered that service, for whatever, to somebody else. So
yes,
they're going,
exactly.
It's okay to talk like this. So if you're struggling, brother, tell me. And then we want to change the narrative around this, where everybody's allowed to just stick their hand up. I'm doing really well, and I want a pat on the back because I've just cracked this daddy thing, because I've just taught my kid how to ride its bike, and I've been really strong. Brilliant, let's go for it. Or the other thing is, I'm coming to terms with a 30-year, relationship with alcohol, and it's not healthy, and I need to do something.
I mean, you're both describing some very, very important sort of processes that we understand in the field of sort of psychology. And two in particular I'm thinking about. One is the power of peer-to-peer networks, and the power of, well, you might call it a tribe or a group or whatever it is, but finding a group where you have commonality through this issue of fathering, and I don't know how to do it, do you? That's the commonality. But then a diversity in every other way, because fathers come from all walks of life and all have exactly the same problem around fathering, which is that we don't really know how to do it, because how can you know how to do something that is evolving so quickly? It would be ridiculous to think that there is some sort of blueprint. And there's no way, I don't know about you guys, but there's no way I could take what my father taught me about fathering and apply it, because that would be a disaster. Because the way he did it was an absolute disaster, you know. So there was no option, but I had to learn new ways of doing things. And of course, learning new ways of doing things is always frightening. It's never easy, but it is a lot easier if you're learning with a bunch of other people who are similarly struggling and feeling vulnerable about it. And the second thing that you're describing, which is why I think this is so much more powerful than, say, Fathers for Justice, is that you're moving from a vicious cycle to a virtuous circle. And when you move into virtuous circles, things happen, they develop a momentum of their own. And they grow and grow and grow because that's the way they work. Whereas vicious cycles just create bigger and bigger problems. So you seem to have harnessed both of those. I've touched upon the subject just there about, you know, previous experiencing of fathering. And Dan, you told us a little bit about your experience. I wouldn't mind, if you're okay with this, Kenneth, just giving us some sense of how you were fathered, what that blueprint was like, and sort of what brought you to the point where you thought about, you know, how do I do this? Because you touched a little bit. You were in child court. We all know about family court and what that's like, and it's best avoided, in my experience. If you can go the mediation route, avoid the court if at all possible. But sort of what was it? And also, while I've still got you, because I've got about 10 minutes of your time before you have to pop off, I know. I'm also interested in drilling down a little bit into the experience of what it's like to be, you know, a Black father in America, coming from poverty and coming from a culture that, you know, seems to want to eradicate your existence at times. So that's a lot of questions there, but I wonder if you can begin to, yeah. And you've got 10 minutes. Can you do that in 10 minutes?
My staffers that just came in, so he's going to be in there for a minute. So I probably got another 30 minutes or so.
Okay, cool, brilliant.
And so, yeah, let me unpack. Let me start. So maybe we'll come back at some of this, but I'll start with my own dad. And so I did not grow up with my father. I met him on my way out of the military at 23 years old. His sister ran into my mom, you know, in a shopping area, and she was telling her about how I had just come home. And a couple of days later, they called and she said that my dad wanted to see me, right? I had just come home from the military. And I remember my mom coming in and telling me that night, and my question was, why? Like, what does he need to see me for? Like, I had no recollection. I had a vague memory of seeing him one time in my life. Just a vague memory of seeing him one time. And so I agonized over it. I was married. It was my first marriage. I was young. I was 20. I was 23 years old, and was talking to my wife about it. I had a 1.5-year-old daughter at the time, my first daughter. And decided that, okay, yeah, let's do this thing. And so I wrote a whole book about it, and I have a documentary that talks about it as well. That's how traumatized I was from the experience itself of having to relive that, and then articulate that into my own life. But met him. And my first impression of him was one of joy to see him, but anger in his response, because when my wife and daughter and I got to his house, he knew we were coming. And we get to the door to ring the doorbell, and it wasn't him that answered the door. It was his wife who answered the door, and he was sitting there watching TV. So immediately, all of those negative emotions I had about him sprung up in me again, just in that brief moment. And he gets up, we walk into the door, and in that moment, right, that moment in time, whether in seconds, right, the decision in my head was whether or not I was going to call him Dad or whether or not I was going to call him Douglas, because that was his name. And when he walked towards me, at that moment, all I wanted to do was hug my dad, and I called him dad, and I hugged him. But it was almost simultaneously when I released him, he became Douglas again. Like, that was the moment I wanted it. I got it. And now I didn't need him anymore. Like I took my hands around him, and he went back to being Douglas in my head. And so we had a number of different encounters over the next year or so, or next year and a half or so. And then shortly thereafter, he passed away. And so with us ever having a conversation about him being a dad to me, like every time I saw him, it was about something else. It was about the Knicks, or it was about a car. It was about, it was never about what I needed to hear from him. And so I have always said that when my dad died, he died and took everything I needed with him, right? All of the answers that I needed from him. And the very thing that I did not want to become, which was him in the life of my daughter at that time, I became him. Like I moved away, we got divorced, I moved away and was away from my daughter for almost 7 years before we reconnected when I got a little older and more mature. And so, you know, I've always kind of filtered in my space, like what that hole was and how I ignored that hole and how adversarial I was to any man that my mother brought into my life, right? Because my mother had set up this scenario that I was the man of the house. Like, and the tipping point for me was when I came in one day, and my mother was very strict about sitting on the arm of the couch, your feet on the coffee table, those kinds of things, which we could not do. And I came in one day, and there was this man that she was dating, and he had his feet on the coffee table, and she was there and didn't say anything, and I lost it. Like, it was like, you know, how dare you? Like, I'm the man of this house. And then to which she said, no, you're not. But you've been telling me all my life, I'm the man of the house, and now you have a new man, and I've lost my job. Like, I've lost my position. I've lost my worth. And that's actually when I went into the military. I mean, I left out of the house in a couple of days, and I walked up this street, and I ran past this recruitment office, and I went in, and that guy told me everything that the boy wanted to hear from a man, which is come into the military, we'll make a man out of you, we'll do all these things that I wanted. He told me, and that was what sucked me into the military. And so in my life, there's a longer story than that, but in a nutshell, you know, I think that where I am now with him, in terms of what I understand about him, is that I cannot call him a deadbeat dad, right? He was a guy who was in World War II. He was a deacon of his church. He had 6 other boys. He was married to their mom their entire life. So he understood what it meant to be a father. There was just something in him that he did not give it to me. And what I understood that to be was the same thing it was for me and my daughter, which was guilt and shame. It's the tallest and biggest obstacle for fathers when they become estranged from their children and don't know how to walk back into the lives of their children because they don't know how to navigate this conversation around the guilt that they're feeling and the shame associated with it.
Yeah, absolutely. Dan, do you feel that your father, again, I don't want to get into father baiting or any of that sort of stuff, but I'm just interested in whether you felt you were given, you know, an adequate blueprint for your sort of life in terms of how your father fathered you. And
my dad was a very special man. He was very successful in business. He had lovely blue eyes. It twinkled. Very funny, very good footballer. People loved him. He was a charming rogue. But there was no blueprint for his parenting. We were, because of having to bring up me and 3 teenage girls and run a business through a couple of recessions, which was in the construction industry, there wasn't time. So a lot of it was we kind of brought ourselves up. a lot of it. There was he'd come back from work, and there was always dinner on that. You know, he would feed us, but he almost had to learn to cook. He had to learn to do all of these things because there wasn't. You know, he never remarried. There was another. He had relationships, but they were never brought into our home. So we had to sort of make it up as we went along. What I really would have liked him to be able to do is to open up a lot more.
Right.
Our relationship was based a lot on humour. My thing was I could really make him laugh, and I used to get great pleasure from seeing him rocking back and forth, you know, tears in his eyes because I've done something good. I was also junior. I took his name, so he had very big shoes to try and fill, and I never quite felt I lived up to that because I was rubbish at football, and I was going to take the family business, and it was within a couple of days of me doing a work experience when I was about 15. It was very clear to everybody I simply was not going to be, an architect. I had to go out and make my own mistakes and find my own thing. So I think, as a blueprint, I think he did incredibly well with the tools he had available. You know, there was no social services involvement. There were no other outside agencies involved. We were just left to get on with it. So in that capacity, I'm gratefully and forever in his debt. But now the lessons that I've learned, I'm a lot more, emotionally in tune with my son. I tell him I love him every time I see him. I give him loads of cuddles. Our emotion with Dad is that, we'd have a boxing match or something like that, or, it'd be a smack. There you are, champ. Well, actually, we do that with my son, but then you're not leaving this house until I've given you a big cuddle and a kiss and told you that I love you, and I've told you that it's okay to be worried. I've told you that it's okay to cry. I think we're obviously a generational thing. It was that being brought up in the house, obviously with 3 older sisters, is that I didn't become too girly. I was brought up to be a man, or the version of a man. So so there was a lot that he did right, a lot that he did wrong, but I don't know if he knew that he was doing wrong because there was nobody else to point it out.
Exactly. I mean, what strikes me about both of you is that you have a very balanced view of your own personal history and your father's and your life experience. I'm sure it wasn't always the case. It certainly hasn't always been the case with me, and there'll be times when I'm not balanced at all. But even though my father was a disaster in so many ways, he did actually do the best he could. It wasn't great, but it was the best he could, and it took me a long time to come to terms with that. And I think when I came to terms with that, when I came to terms with the fact that he was just a human being doing the best that he could, that let me off the hook in some ways to similarly just be a human being with myself and stop having sort of ridiculous expectations about what I should or shouldn't be. And I think at that point, I began to start learning properly, really learning from life. And that I think is really important. And you both seem very grounded in your ability to sort of learn and be vulnerable around things. I mean, I'm really enjoying the conversation. You're like the sort of guys I'd want to hang out with. So that's all I'm doing at the moment. I'm supposed to be doing an interview, or I'm not. I'm just like hanging out with 2 really cool guys. So that's great. And I'm calling this work as well, which is fantastic. I'd like to come back if we may, Ken, to some of the other questions I asked you about the specific circumstances under which you are working at the moment in the US, and the particular. I don't want to create divisions between the work where you're creating connections, but there's a certain sense in which I think of the concept of intersectionality being appropriate here, that there is a commonality in terms of being guys and being fathers and finding connections, but there's also intersectionality. There's unique types of experiences that need to be looked at, which have particular strains. And I wonder if you mind sort of going towards some of that, Ken, and talking about the experience that you're having there. You're on mute, Ken. It's okay, don't worry. Just go back to the start of that.
Yeah, for me, it is, I can't separate the two things.
Right.
Like, I can't separate the fact that I'm a Black man and a father, and I'm both of those, right? And so I also can't separate the fact that many of the young men and young women that are losing their lives around the world to law enforcement are daddies themselves that are leaving children fatherless, that many of them are somebody's son or daughter. There's some daddy's son or daughter. And so, for me, it is, and then, I live under the reality that, and I always say this, and it keeps me grounded with respect to the beauty of talking about dads. And so, yeah, we got some problems. And yeah, there's some dads out there that just totally disconnect, don't want to be involved. That is such a small number of us, right? But they get the biggest attention in this space, right? And we got to continue to press upon the world that fathers are there, they're engaged, but the social narrative is always around fathers and men in particular, and in this country, Black men are the problem, not the solution, and not part of the solution.
Yeah.
And so our work is always around making sure, again, I said earlier, my question is always, what about dad? Because almost every social ill that we grapple with in this country around family has a thread in father absence, right? Or the impact on fathers. 80% of our children who are homeless come from a fatherless household. If they are have ever been engaged in domestic violence or child abuse, or 80, if we talk about incarceration, 80% of the men that are locked up and incarcerated are fathers, right? And so we're everywhere, right? And then so they attach us to the negativity of who we are, and then you take and you add Black onto that, and it increases the intensity of what you're talking about,
Sure.
right? And then at the same time, in America right now, research has already bared it out, and it says that in America, Black fathers are the most engaged fathers in the day-to-day activities of their children of any other cohort of dads in America, including white, Latino, and Asian dads.
Yeah.
So my work is always trying to put a frame around this conversation so that we can speak about it from the position that it needs to be spoke about, and strip the societal narrative away that takes literal terms and empower them in a way that continues to oppress fathers in general, but Black fathers in this space. I'm gonna give you two quick ones. One is, so it drives me up a wall when people use the statistic that 73% of African-American children are born into out-of-wedlock households. And what they'll say is 73% of Black children don't have fathers in their lives. That's a lie. It's not even statistically true to the stat itself. But the notion is just because a child is born into an out-of-wedlock household that somehow dad doesn't exist.
Yeah.
Right? And so the counter narrative for me has to be, first of all, let's make this clear. From my perspective, and we can argue terms, right? But from my perspective, there is no such thing as a fatherless child. There is absolutely no such thing as a fatherless child. Every biological child on this planet has a father, right? The question isn't if he exists, the question is where he exists, because he can be deployed, he can be incarcerated, he can be across town, across country, across world. He could be a lot of different things, but the one thing he's not is non-existent. And what that does is that we continue to buy into the narrative that he's not in their lives. It does a disservice to the parents that hear that, but it has a deeper impact on children who begin to absorb this narrative that fathers don't exist. So you have children who are in schools where you can't even have a daddy-daughter dance in a school without the administration say, oh, we want to do that because we don't want to make the kids who don't have fathers feel bad. Wait a minute, which children are you talking about? Because I guarantee you that every child in this school has a father. What you don't want to do is have the conversation about where he is, because you don't want to do the deep heart work that it takes to include fathers in the lives of your child. And so from that narrative, and from the specifically to the question that you asked around Black fathers, my push is always to make sure that whenever I'm having conversations about dad, Black men, I'm connecting those conversations to the fact that they are fathers or their sons, right? And we cannot forget the fact that they're interconnected together. So because we when we talk about, you know, Black men, it's kind of like this thing that we don't really want to deal with, this thing that we really don't want to talk about. If we could just make it go away, we'll make it go away. But what are you talking about making going away? You're talking about somebody's son, somebody's uncle, somebody's cousin, somebody's grandchild, somebody's father, somebody's grandfather. You're not just discarding an element of society that you just don't want to deal with. You're talking about an integral part of the fabric of family, not only in America, but around the world. You're talking about an integral part of family life. And so for us, it's a struggle, right? And so it's a fight that we have to keep having. You know, unfortunately, it intensifies when things like George Floyd happens, right? This ain't the first time that we've had a flare up. You know, it happened with Eric Garner, it happened with Trayvon Martin, it happened with Emmett Till. It happens and happens throughout history. The problem and the challenge we have to grapple with around the world, even in the UK, is that the driving element of society right now is Generation Z. They're not even millennials. So a millennial hasn't been born in 23 years. What's happening now is Generation Z is becoming parent-bearing age, and they're becoming into the age of awareness, right? The number one characteristic of Generation Z is they have absolutely no fear of authority. None. They have zero fear of authority. And the second is that technology is intimately connected to them. That technology for us was an option. Technology for them is a reality.
No, that's right, absolutely.
Right? And so you take those two things.
They're technology natives, that's right.
Yes. And now you're dealing with a dangerous generation.
Yeah.
One who could care less about rules because they know they can break them. One who doesn't care about authority because they know they can create their own authority, and one who doesn't care about influence, and they definitely don't care about history because they believe they can remake history, right? And in a moment's notice. And so I know that was a lot to what you just asked, but it's the lot that I have to deal with every day.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think it's fantastic. And I'm sort of, Dan, I want to bring you in to some of these themes. So sort of some of the things that you talked about are very powerful themes. So one of them being, there's been a myth of family that's been propagated about what a family is. And that myth is they're white, they're of a certain socioeconomic status, and they're nuclear. So there's mummy, daddy, and two kids. That family structure has only ever been at the maximum a third of families. And that, you know, research over the years has shown that most of us existing families are much more complex than that, much more blended, and always have been. And that is the norm. The norm is complex. And that family relationships are not defined by biology, they're defined by choice and relationship and emotional connection that we have to somebody. So somebody's our dad, or somebody's our mum, somebody's our child because we call them that, and because we relate to them in that way. and that, I think, deals with some of the questions you're saying about this fantasy absence. There's also another thing I think is going on, and it's about poverty. So there was a lot of research done in the UK, and I'll stop kicking my desk so my camera doesn't wobble. There's research done in the UK around that fathers weren't absent, but the economics meant that it made better sense if they pretended that they were.
Right.
Because they got certain types of state benefits if they didn't show up. But they were there, but they just hid from the authorities because being a single mum, you got more money, etc., etc., than if he was there as well. And the whole system was designed to make it appear that somebody wasn't there. So there's that as well. I mean, it's just, you know, it comes down to a simple word. It's bullshit. The whole thing about absence. It's absolute bullshit.
A question, if I may, for Kenny. It's something what you just talked about, that every child's got a father, but there's a line in a song called "Be a father to your child." It takes a boy to make one, but a man to raise one. So every child has a father, and biologically, obviously, but I think there's maybe kids that don't have a dad, and I think there's very different or a strong male role model in their life. So it doesn't have to be a biological thing, but a consistent, strong role model. So I think there's a very different thing of being somebody's father and being somebody's dad.
Well, again, what the research shows is, and this is why we need to deal with this issue, is that we would say, you know, policymakers might say there is a problem with absent fathers, etc. It doesn't happen that way. What happens is kids will find these father figures no matter what, because it's a need, and often, you know, and this is for kids of a certain socioeconomic status and position in society, those father figures tend to be in gangs, etc., etc., and that's where they will find them. And you know, I did loads of work with gang kids, and they all consistently say exactly the same thing. They were just looking for that father figure, and so as a society, we either deal with what you guys are doing and promote it, or we deal with the fact that Generation Z don't give a shit. Really, and they're going to go and find these father figures somewhere, and either we nurture fathering as a resource and invest in it, or these kids will go off and find it, and what they find we will not like.
Right.
Okay, we just won't like it. We won't like the consequences, and these I think are just in the nature of facts that we have to come to terms with. We have to come to terms with those conversations. I'm fascinated at the moment, Dan, with sort of how you've come, because it seems to me that you know, somehow you're in a position where you've generated this energy that is creating these connections, and I think there is something going on, and this is about COVID, and we're in the last bit of the show. Maybe we can sort of talk about this. There's something about COVID is happening, which is quite revolutionary, in that it has forced a lot of men who are fathers, who have seen their role maybe to go out, provide for the family with work and stuff like that. They've been forced into the domestic space, and they've had to take their work home and be home. And actually, my experience is, as I'm talking to guys, they're loving it.
I think he froze a little bit. I think he froze.
You're buffering.
Yeah, so until he comes back, I do want to address, because I think I would assume that people are still listening to us. I would one of the things I did not say, Dan, is I didn't add the second half of what you were addressing. The second half of what I was going to say after I said there's no such thing as a fatherless child is that the terminology that we should be embracing and talking about is father absence. So every child is dealing, or some children are dealing with measures and degrees of father absence, right? And so even though you have a father, there's one child that doesn't see their father at all, another child that only sees them every other day, another child that only sees them every other weekend, another child that only sees them every other month, another child that only sees them twice a year, another child that only sees them, and then there's this dad, there's this dad.
I think you've missed something as well. There can be the dads that, the kids that do have the dads that are present or there, but they're not emotionally present. They're not emotion. So you've got the father figure in the house, but they're shut off. And then you've got dad.
Yes. So it's the father absence piece that we got to deal with. It's the degrees of father absence, right? And so one of the other things that we say is a dad can be compensated for, but a dad can't be replaced, right? And so that's really important for guys who step up and step into the place of a dad who's absent, irregardless of the measure of absence he has. So that we as men, like my daughter, my middle daughter has I'm not her biological father. She came into my life when she was 7 years old. And one day I was taking her to school because I always drove her to school. And she asked me, could she call me dad? And my response to her was, call me what you're comfortable with, because I'll understand what you mean when you call me. Like if you call me Kenny, I'll know that you still mean dad. But what I don't want you to do is call me dad because you have a notion of me replacing your dad, because you need to know that you always have a father. And what you and I need to do is I need to give you everything you need from my perspective, but let's leave a door open for him to show up if he ever decides he wants to show up, and embrace him when he does. So
what if he doesn't?
So
what if he doesn't?
If he doesn't, she's still going to search for him. She's still going to search for him. And what I don't want to do is plug my hand in that hole, and one day she decides that she wants to see him and she knocks my hand out of that hole because she wants him to come in. So you got to nurture that hole and recognize that it exists, that it's there. But what you want to do as a man is you want to lessen and minimize the pain of his existence. Because they're always going to look for it, no matter how great a dad you are. Look at adopted children who have very great foster parents. They can be the best foster parents in the entire world, but one day those children are going to walk in front of them and they're going to say, I want to know my parents. I want to know who they are. And if you stand in their way and serve as a block to doing that, there'll be a moment where they will turn to you and say the most hurtful thing you have ever heard in your life. And they will say to you, you're not my father.
No, I get that. And I think that there's a psychological need that we all have to get to know our parents as adults. And I think it's something children can't do. They can't get to know their parents. You grow into that knowledge through experience of life, as the three of us have in our understanding of our own parents. And that takes time, it takes experience, it takes etc. I didn't really get to know my father as in embrace him as a human being with all his flaws until I was well into my 40s.
Right.
And so we can't expect our children. I'm very, very much identify with what you're saying, Ken, because I have a stepson who's 10, and I wouldn't dream of suggesting that his hurt and pain that he has about the absent genetic father is anything other than real and valuable in his life and a very important part of who he is. And that's his life task, is to come to terms with that. That's not mine, and I can't take that away from him, and never would I even try. But I'm desperate to be good enough for him, right. Without a doubt.
And you started that.
And I just, it's the one area of my life, I get into absolute bits if I think I'm getting it wrong. And sort of.
And so you're talking about boys, but for girls, oh my God, it's like I've had, and I've seen
absolutely.
break right down in front of me, and they'll just be boo-hooing about that. I'm like, but wait a minute, you have a guy in your life that you call dad. Yeah, I love him, he does, but he's not my father, right? And it's kind of like, whoa,
Yeah.
how long have you been carrying that?
Yeah, quite, absolutely. I'm sorry I dropped out there for a while, guys, but my internet just decided to go and whatever. I don't know. I don't understand. It did something and then came back. That's great. It's all magic. It's all magic as far as I'm concerned.
We were gossiping like a couple of old women anyway.
I heard, yeah, James was saying, I was like, yeah, they don't need me, thank God. We're into the sort of last 5 minutes of the show, and I want to, maybe come back a little bit to this extraordinary project that you guys have put together for Father's Day, and really big that up a bit, because I think that's so important, and that we, that we promote that as much as possible. I've had my team sort of trying to get you some press around it, and I want to come back and talk about that a little bit. If somebody new to all of this turns up on Sunday, where are they turning up, and what are they going to expect? What's going to actually happen that they can be part of?
Very, very straightforward. You jump onto Zoom. You're going to go into a lovely waiting room that's going to be staffed by one of the team. That's going to bring you, just give you some safeguarding tools, or not tools, some advice. So obviously we're dealing with children, so we've got some health and safety issues. So little things like, maybe if you've got your camera, move it away from the ones that have any identifiable photographs on the back, or anything. You can tell us as much about yourself as you want to. That's the bottom line. Then we've got, I think I'm running a scavenger hunt. Then we've got some quizzes, and the beauty of Zoom is you've got breakout rooms. So we've got the quiz first of all, then we've got some breakout rooms. So we've got a Lego challenge. I think Kenny's going to do a story time with some of his books. We've got, it needs to be 100% confirmed, but I think we've got a couple of, say, very well-known YouTubers coming in, and maybe quite a famous street dance guy as well. So we're going to break out into these side rooms. And then we're going to come back, and we've got a brilliant charity that we work with called Audio Active, which is, you might have heard of him, Kenny, a guy called Rag and Bone Man over in the UK. He's quite a big singer, and they do some amazing music production work with young people. And I met them a couple of years ago, and they were doing this beat programming on tools and getting some really amazing results with, hard to reach teenagers. It's like, right, I want to take that software and put it in the hands of a 4-year-old and see what we can do. So we work quite closely with them. So we've got a freestyle rap challenge. So we're going to have some, some rap challenges and stuff. And I think hopefully we're going to break out into these different rooms. So you're going to be put into a space and have to work in teams with some projects with dads you've never met before. And rather than going, right, all the UK fellas are over here and all the US fellas are over there. There's going to be a bit of banter, because obviously we know football is football and it's not soccer, things like that. But we can have this, commonality within the quizzes and stuff. We've been doing it, for the last few months. So it's just not an upgrade, it's slightly different. And I'm really looking forward to being able to sit in, one of the right side of them and listen to Kenny tell a story, because that's an opportunity that my son would never have. We are from vastly different backgrounds. Or the dads that are coming in from Kenya or France and stuff like that. My dream, or one of them, is that we can somehow connect these kids, and maybe they can become pen pals. They're too young to go on Facebook. Well, they wouldn't go on Facebook anyway because they're young kids. But exchange some addresses. And I think Kenny has an amazing director of communications, Tamika, that I've fallen in love with. She's an amazing woman, and I think they're doing some stuff. Correct me if I'm wrong, Kenny, with like the public school system over there in the States. So there's going to have some kids that have been access to technology that maybe they don't normally have, are able to take part in this. And wouldn't it be great for them to, build up a friendship with like a, a kid in Glasgow or a kid in France or a kid in Sussex, and they can grow up being able to have conversations and ask questions without building up some kind of unknown fear of each other in this horrible ignorance that we are now facing ourselves, because they've got a pal. And the beauty of kids is they can ask questions and where we fear to tread. And I think that would be a really wonderful thing.
It's amazing. I mean, I'm genuinely bowled away, but both of you is just as people. I mean, I remember when you came on a year ago, Dan, and it was just like we had a real hoot together then. And to meet you tonight, Ken, has been absolutely beautiful, really beautiful to meet you. And sort of the work that you guys are doing is extraordinary. I know how challenging it is. One of the things that's striking me is that the kids that are going to be involved in this are going to see something really beautiful that they may not get to see very often, which is that, you know, fathers cooperating together to make something happen. It not being a competition, it not being frightening or challenging, but their dads all mucking in.
There will be a bit of competition because we're dads. You know, when it comes to that rap battle or that street dance battle, I'm winning. I don't care. You know.
Okay. Safe competition.
Safe competition. Yeah, a little bit of friendly banter.
Friendly banter.
Yeah, I think they're nice because it's Father's Day. At the end of the day, it's an experience for us as individuals and parents to take part. So we want to just laugh.
I guess seeing a version of fathers who are cooperative and working together and competing in a friendly way, but a version of fathers that are present and available and are working together to be good parents, rather than just simply good providers. I mean, dads are great at providing, and I wouldn't ever want to take that role away, or if somebody that's what, but the mucking in and being the dad who's involved in the play is still something that, you know, a lot of kids really crave. And one thing my experience is that dads are really good fun. And when you give them the opportunity and their kids seeing them have fun themselves is such a healing and such a beautiful experience. So it's going to be a lot of fun. We have on Facebook Live and all the other media channels where we put a link to the Daddy Fest 2020. What other links can we put on before we go? So, Kenneth, what would be the links to your organisation that we can put on? You're on mute, Ken.
I'm going to ask so you guys to send me the link as to where this is so I can share this on my pages after we're done. And so, but certainly fathersincorporated.com, you know, our academic arm and our training arm of what we do is gentlewarriorsacademy.com. That's where we have all of our trainings around co-parenting and fatherhood and communications and all of the other things that we do our virtual training on.
Great.
Across social media, we're Fathers Incorporated, with the exception of Twitter, where we're Fathers Incorp. And then me personally, I'm Kenneth Braswell everywhere, with the exception of Twitter, where it's backwards Braswell Kenneth. And so please follow us. And I will say this ending, I did want to say this too, Dan. I'm less excited about Saturday as I am about the future and evolution of this. Like, I literally can already see like the 10th anniversary of Data Festo when we're like in 100 countries and it's hundreds of thousands of people like online virtually celebrating. I can see it as clear as I can see the hand in front of my face. And that's what's got me so excited about Saturday, that this conversation we're going to look back on and be like, remember we had that conversation? And like start doing it and look at where we are now. So,
well, I think I want to go one step above that, because we was going to happen this year. We were going to create the UK's first festival of fatherhood, which was a big weekender where you bring all the dads and kids together and do all of the activities, but in a farm in the middle of nowhere. And talking to Tamika, your lovely director, I've already invited you guys. You'll come in, and I want to bring Dad Lasole over to Georgia, and we're going to have a block party. So the virtual thing is great. I think for the 10th
Okay.
anniversary, I want to take it to the streets.
Yeah,
Okay.
absolutely. Okay, you heard it here, folks. This is we'll be back in 10 years' time to make sure they keep their word. All right. I'm going to hold you accountable, young men, now that you've made this. Really gorgeous to have you both on this evening. It's been an absolutely fantastic evening. Unfortunately, we have to wrap up there. Thank you, both of you, for your wisdom and your kindness and your love and your compassion, and bringing that on. It's such a beautiful thing. I'm going to say goodbye to everybody, and we will see you next week when we have one of the founders of the Resilience, a series of organisations that have set up what's called a Resilience Task Force to help people recover psychologically and emotionally after the coronavirus. So looking at mental health needs, it's going to be a fantastic show. And it's been lovely to have you all here. Going to say goodbye for now. Ken, Dan, do you want to say goodbye?
All right.
Yeah. Thank you very much, fellas. I've really, it's late and it's been a long day and it's been a heavy week. So thank you, Noel, for giving us a platform. Kenny, I know you're extremely busy, so we're going to squeeze you in for half an hour, but then we're going to squeeze you in for an hour. Then you've actually stayed for about an hour and 40 minutes because you don't shut up, which is wonderful. We need to have more of these sort of conversations, because I think the more I know more about you guys and your organisation, I see so much symmetry between our causes and our ethos and our passions. And I think if we can cement those in some way, we can have a hell of an impact. So yeah, thank you very much, Kenny. Noel, thank you very much for having me on again. And I need a cup of tea and sit down and shut up now.
Yeah, me too.
Bye-bye, folks.
All right, take care.
Cheers.